Now, when I first started out taking portraits, the hardest thing for me wasn't the technicals, it wasn't camera settings or learning off-camera lighting, it was posing. How to pose people in front of the camera. And I know that I'm not alone when I say this, because the other day I made a new post in the photography community asking people what do they wish they could do better, what they knew or understood more, be it for their photography or retouching or whatever. And as you can see, it's had lots of comments. One though really stood out to me. This one here, where this person commented, "I wish I understood posing more." And they then went on to say that they freeze up when it comes to posing. And this I totally relate to. So I thought in this short video, I'd share 5 tips or things that have really helped me when posing someone in front of the camera. One of them you can only do once, but there's 5 tips or suggestions in total. Now, this first one I used to do literally when I'd completely run out of ideas. With the person in front of my camera, I'd stop and just say something like, "Actually, just relax for a minute. I need to make some changes to the settings in the camera." Now, I didn't. The settings were fine. I just needed them to come out of that I'm being photographed zone and start to relax more. So while I was pretending to make changes on the back of the camera, I'd be keeping one eye on them, who hopefully by now would relax more, and their posture was kind of naturally theirs that they'd slipped into. So then I would just go, "Actually, just hold that for a second," and then take a shot. And this works a treat. But of course, there's only once, maybe twice you could do that in a photo shoot before they really start to twig what you're doing. Now, for me, this next suggestion is what's made the biggest difference. And that was simply looking at other photographers' work. I would and still do go onto places like Pinterest and look through work by people like Annie Leibovitz and Mark Seliger. I'd study the portraits, looking at the poses, and would be building up a mental library so that I could then use those later when someone was in front of the camera. Now, I remember when starting out hearing the advice to give your subject something to hold. And yeah, that sounded good until the photo shoot came along, and then I'd be asked, "How do you want me to hold this?" whatever it was. But one thing I really liked was how both Annie Leibovitz and Mark Seliger used chairs in their portraits. And so this is something I started doing, and this made such a difference. I would ask the person to take a seat whilst I was getting everything all ready, and they'd be relaxed and sitting as they ordinarily would. And it was that I captured. I'd show them pictures by Mark Seliger and Annie Leibovitz on my iPad and say, "This is the kind of thing I'm thinking of." And I'd maybe leave it on the ground in front of them. They would then start to mimic it, and that guaranteed a result. But best of all is that they would begin to relax more in that pose and then naturally kind of make their own adjustments, which 9 times out of 10 ended up with a better pose because it was them. These pictures here, every one of them was captured after I just said, "Let's take a break for a moment." The minute I'd say that, it's like flicking a switch and their natural pose just appeared. This guy here asked if he could have a cigarette during the shoot, and yeah, I'm pretty glad I said yes, go for it. Now, this follows on from the previous tip in that I always find showing somebody what I want them to do rather than telling them is so much better. I mentioned this in an earlier video about mood boarding, but this picture here was inspired by a portrait of Sir Patrick Stewart and Ian McClellan taken by Annie Leibovitz. When I was photographing the two guys, I showed them the picture, and they then both ended up like this with very little input from me. Another example is this one here, inspired by the movie Southpaw. I showed the couple the movie ad on my iPad, and they knew exactly what was wanted, and it worked an absolute treat. Actually, yeah, movie posters, they are a great resource for inspiration when it comes to posing subjects. The last thing I do, which kind of applies to every single portrait shoot, is slow down, chat, and observe. I always find that when I just stop taking photographs and then just chat with the person in front of me, that is when the magic happens. That is when they relax and start to move and hold themselves normally. And that might sound odd, but when we direct people to do this and do that, they very quickly start to move and hold themselves in ways they ordinarily wouldn't. And I think that really shows in the image. Stopping and chatting changes it totally. When you see them move and position themselves in a way that you think would work really well, just ask them to pause for a moment and take the shot, which is another great reason for having your camera on a tripod aimed at them. You just press the shutter rather than recomposing. So off the top of my head, that's 5 things that have really helped and still do with how I pose people, or not as the case may be. Pretend to be changing settings on the camera, get inspiration from other photographers' work, use props, show me, don't tell me, and slow down, chat and observe. But if there's anything different that you do, let me know in the comment section below. But that's all I have for you now, so I'll catch you in the next video.